And you don't have many mosquitoes right now, maybe in the evening.
They're definitely around because the cacao trees need a still wet environment, so same breeding ground for mosquitoes. Yeah, it's the trade you have to take. If you want chocolate, then mosquitoes come with it.
Yeah, but I haven't seen many, so.
All right, nice. Cross your fingers. All right, so the cacao trees, they originate from the Amazon basin. So think about that kind of environment. It's hot, it's humid. They're an understory tree, meaning they need big shade trees above it to protect it from the direct sunlight and the direct wind. So to grow cacao trees, you have to have a protected, shaded area with no wind, indirect sunlight, and a lot of water. So it's the same breeding ground for mosquitoes, but that's the environment that the cacao trees need. And that's because if you look at the trees, they has super tiny little flowers. Don't touch the flowers because you'll knock them off. So you can see the tiny flowers right here. What pollinates these tiny flowers is a microscopic bug. See all these flowers up here? A microscopic bug called a gnat, or called a midge. It's the size of a gnat or a no-see-um. They're so small that even the naked eye can't even really pick up what's going on there. And it was a mystery for a long time what was pollinating the cacao trees, because you would see a tree with flowers and then all of a sudden fruit would be growing, but you would never see like a bee or an ant or a bird. It's a little tiny microscopic bug. So another reason why you need that still environment. If it's a little bit too windy, then the midges can't navigate the wind, and you can have a mature tree filled with flowers, no fruit. So it has to be a very still environment. You can come in a little bit more if you like.
Hard to grow then. You need a lot of different things going on.
Well, you can tuck them away here and there. What's nice about the cacao trees is that you can fit a lot in a very small area. So if you look at mango trees or lychee trees, those trees get really big and you got to plant them about 70 feet apart. Whereas cacao trees, you can plant them as little as 5 or 6 feet apart because it's this spindly understory tree. It doesn't get huge. And so when you plant them close together, what they do when they mature, then their canopies will touch and then they'll protect each other from the sun and the wind. You'll need this leaf litter on the floor. The leaf litter is a breeding ground for the midges. The leaf litter helps keep all the moisture in the soil. So you never want to scrape the leaves off the dirt. All right, so what I have here in my hand, these are cacao beans that have been fermented and dried and roasted. And so if you want to take the bowl, take out a bean and pass it around. So each bean has a protective skin around it. So think about coffee's got a little skin, rice has a little skin, wheat has a little skin that you have to take off in a process called winnowing. And so I remember when I was a kid watching PBS programs where people in the rice paddy fields were winnowing the rice, and you would see women just step out into the wind with a nice big basket and toss the rice once or twice, and then that skin would just fly off in the wind. That's why it's called winnowing, because the wind will take away the skin, whereas the rice is heavy enough to stay in the basket. So same thing with the cacao beans. There's that protective skin. You just peel it off, just pinch it and pop it in your hand to take off that skin. And I remove that in a process called winnowing. I don't toss it in the wind. I feel like I'll lose everything, so I use a hair dryer. But it does the same thing. All the chaff goes flying out, and then what stays are the nibs, and the nibs are what you grind up to make chocolate. And so if you were to take one of those beans, it looks like a whole bean, but if you were to carefully peel off that skin, the bean inside looks like a brain. It has all these little segments interlocking into each other like a puzzle. But after it's fermented and dried and roasted, the bean just kind of crumbles up into little bits. And so a broken up bean is simply called cacao nibs. So broken bean, cacao nibs, same thing. But if you look at it, it looks like a brain. And so it's interesting that it looks like a brain and it's good for your brain. It's one of the highest foods in antioxidants, leaps and bounds above red wine, blueberries. One of the few antioxidants that can pass through the blood-brain barrier. So kind of fun. So when you take apart the bean, it crumbles into little bits. And then there's this one little bit that looks like a pin. That's the germ. So if you were to propagate more cacao trees, you would take a pod off the tree. There's about 35 or 40 beans or seeds inside. Now what's fascinating is that if you take those beans and dry them out like you would for like tomato seeds, and you say, I'm going to plant these later, impossible. Once you dry out that seed, you kill the germ. So you'll never see cacao seeds in any seed bank. You have to have a living tree going all the time to keep it going. And so that's the germ. That's where, if you were to plant it in the ground, that's where it would sprout up. But when you break it up into nibs, that's actually the hardest part to grind up. Right there is that little bit, that germ. So the cacao trees are interesting because they're very similar to humans if you look at their lifespan and productivity. So these trees are around 7 years old. The cacao trees can live for up to 100 years, but around middle age production starts to go down. So then you would want to replant, or you can graft. So if the trees are reaching 40 years old or 50 years old, you can take a young tree and graft that young tree onto the old tree. And as the young section takes off, you can chainsaw off the older section, and that tree will produce in 3 years what would normally take 5 if you did it from seed. So there's some farmers, like one farm I went to in Colombia, that's how he kept his cacao growing, was constantly grafting as the trees got older. All right, what'd you think of the cacao nibs? There's no sugar, no vanilla. It's kind of like a coffee bean. Crunchy, a bit bitter, intense chocolatey flavor. So what I have here, this is the chaff, the skin of the cacao bean. And so when I winnow off all the chaff, I collect it back up, and we use this for a number of things. We like to use it as a mulch and a fertilizer because it's got a lot of different minerals that are going to be great to put right back into the soil. If you're a huge chocolate company like Guittard, Hershey's, then what they do is they sell this chaff to a third-party company because this chaff is still high in caffeine, theobromine. It's got that chocolate flavor to it. So there's a third-party company that could extract all those chemicals out of the chaff and then put those in whatever product. You can also use this as a loose leaf tea. So if you're more of a tea drinker than a coffee drinker, and you want more of that mild kind of energy flow instead of the spike of caffeine, then the chaff is really great because it still has trace minerals and the chemicals in there like caffeine and theobromine, but it's maybe 1/10 of a cup of coffee. It's really kind of low and subtle. But if you want to take a handful and smell it, it smells really great. And what's fun is every time I'm winnowing, a bee always shows up. I don't know, they love it. It smells so good though. It's kind of sweet smelling. Maybe that's what they like. Rub it all over you. And whenever you're done, you can just toss it around a tree. Some nurseries will sell the cacao skin as a mulch. So you'll have a cacao skin or cacao husk as a mulch you can put around your trees. It only half works for us here because as soon as I put it around the trees, the chickens come by and just scratch it all up. If you had a dog, you probably wouldn't want to put the mulch around your trees because it is high in theobromine and caffeine. So theobromine is a smooth muscle relaxer, and caffeine can overstimulate their heart. So one of the two could hurt or kill a dog, depending on the size and how much they eat. So the caffeine speeding up the heart too much, theobromine relaxing the heart too much, and then the blood can't flow. So, little side note. Mine's got a heart murmur. Oh, a heart murmur. My grandma had a heart murmur.
Oh my God.
Oh no, my dad had a heart murmur, but it healed up in his 50s. It just went away too much.